Welcome to the deep dive. You sent us your sources, and well, we've jumped right in to pull out the key stuff for you.
Yeah, and this time the topic you picked is a big one. Building wealth and figuring out retirement planning.
Definitely. We've got a mix here, a review of the Algebra of Wealth, this Forbes.com article called How to Build Wealth Doing Nothing.
Yeah.
Intriguing title.
Huh. Yeah, it is. And also a really detailed guide from the U.S. Department of Labor taking the mystery out of retirement planning. So quite a range.
Okay, let's get into it because thinking about wealth, retirement,
Yeah.
it can feel, pretty overwhelming, like this giant jigsaw puzzle.
Right. So our mission here really is to synthesize all this, pull out the actionable bits from these different sources so you can see a clearer path without getting sort of bogged down.
Exactly. So where do we start? Maybe with the foundation. That mindset piece, both Forbes and the Algebra of Wealth seem to hit on this.
They really do. Forbes is quite direct, saying your money mindset is everything. It's about shifting from just, earning and spending day to day to actually creating systems so your money grows, even when you're, well, doing nothing, as the title suggests.
And the Algebra of Wealth review backs that up.
Seems like it. Highlighting that people who build significant wealth often have this really proactive and deliberate approach to their finances, not just letting things happen.
It's interesting, the Forbes piece mentions that wealthy people have budgets too,
Yeah.
which kind of goes against maybe some stereotypes.
It does a bit, yeah. But it frames it differently, not so much about restriction, like we might think of budgets,
Right.
more about strategically aiming their money towards those bigger long-term goals. It's like a steering wheel for your finances.
I like that analogy, being deliberate. And okay, for business owners listening, Forbes had some specific advice there too, didn't it?
Yes, definitely. Thinking about your business not just as your job, but as a vehicle for financial freedom. That's a key shift in perspective.
So how do you actually do that?
Well, they suggest practical things like having an exit strategy from the start, or at least thinking about it, automating processes wherever you can, freeing up your time, and focusing on the parts of the business that are, higher margin and maybe less hands-on for you.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
I remember early on trying to do absolutely everything myself is just exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally automated some simple things like client onboarding, sending invoices automatically, it wasn't just about saving a few hours. It really shifted my focus.
That's a perfect example. Moving from working in the business to working on it, designing it for your financial goals.
Right.
And another thing Forbes mentioned, building multiple income streams. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, essentially. It diversifies risk.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so mindset, habits, maybe structuring your business differently.
Right.
What about the actual growing of the money? Investing comes next, I guess.
Exactly. Both Forbes and the Department of Labor Guide get into this, and they point to some pretty common starting points.
Like what?
Low cost, diversified index funds, that's a recurring theme, a solid foundation for, most people.
Okay, index funds. Simple, broad exposure.
Yeah. And Forbes also mentions dividend-paying stocks. The idea there is you get potential growth plus regular income payouts.
Which you can then reinvest.
Precisely, which ties right into the concept of compounding.
Ah, yes, the magic of compounding. The DOL guide even brings up that quote, supposedly from Einstein.
Yeah.
Calling it the world's greatest math discovery or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines. And it really is powerful. It's, earning returns not just on your original money, but on the returns themselves.
Like a snowball rolling downhill, getting bigger faster.
Exactly. Investopedia explains it well. It's not just linear growth, it's exponential. The curve gets steeper over time. It feels slow at first, maybe, but then it really starts to accelerate.
Can you give an example? How much difference does it make?
Sure. Investopedia uses one like this. Say you invest $100,000 at a simple 5% interest per year. Over 10 years, that's $50,000 in interest. Straightforward. But if that 5% is compounded monthly instead of just calculated simply each year, you'd end up with something closer to $64,700 in interest over those same 10 years.
Wow, so that's nearly $15,000 extra just from the interest earning its own interest.
Exactly. That's the power of it working over time.
Is there an easy way to estimate that doubling effect?
There's a quick rule of thumb called the rule of 72. You just divide 72 by your expected annual rate of return.
Okay.
So if you think you can get, say, a 7% average annual return, you divide 72 by 7, which is just over 10. So your money might roughly double in about 10 years.
That's actually really handy for a quick check.
It is. And of course, if you want the precise numbers, Investopedia shows the actual compound interest formulas, but the rule of 72 gives you a good ballpark.
And the key takeaway here, especially from the DOA guide.
Start early. The sooner you begin, even if it's with small amounts, the longer compounding has to work for you. Time is like the secret ingredient, especially crucial if you're younger.
Right. So that covers the growth side. Let's pivot now to the planning for retirement itself. That Department of Labor guide, taking the mystery out of retirement planning, seems like the main source here.
It really is comprehensive, and it starts by pointing out, look, retirement isn't what it used to be. Fewer people have those traditional pensions. It's much more on us, our savings, plus Social Security.
And we're living longer too, right? That's a factor.
A big one. The DOL notes many people live well into their 80s, even 90s now, so your retirement savings need to stretch further.
Okay, so how do they suggest we approach this? They call it a simplified bottom line approach.
Yeah. It basically starts with, okay, let's figure out what you have now. Take stock of your assets.
What does that include?
Everything, really. Cash savings, investments, maybe valuable things you own. And crucially, they mention tracking down any forgotten retirement accounts. Old 401ks from previous jobs.
Oh yeah, that's easy to do. You move jobs a few times.
Exactly. So find those, and they suggest consolidating them if possible. Just makes things easier to manage.
Makes sense. Anything else in that taking stock phase?
Yes, an important point, particularly for married women. Think about your finances, both as a couple and as an individual. Statistically, women often live longer, so planning for potential widowhood is, well, practical.
That's a sobering but necessary thought. What about home equity? Can we count on that?
The DOL advises caution there. Be realistic. Yes, your home is an asset, but tapping into that equity isn't always simple or desirable, and you still have ongoing costs like taxes, maintenance, which often go up.
Okay, so know what you have, find old accounts, be realistic about home equity. Then what?
Then you start projecting. The guide helps you estimate how your current savings might grow over, say, the next 10 years.
Yeah.
They use different potential rates of return like 3%, 5%, 7%.
And they give some context for those rates.
Yeah, they provide examples of average annual returns for different investments over a recent 10-year period, money markets, treasury notes, the S&P 500 index, small cap stocks, bonds. Just to give you a feel, obviously past performance isn't, a guarantee for the future.
Right, but it helps ground the projections.
Exactly. Then you do a similar projection for any new savings you plan to add over those next 10 years, again, using different growth scenarios.
So you end up with an estimate of your total potential assets at retirement.
That's the idea. And the next big step is figuring out what that lump sum translates to in terms of potential monthly income during retirement. Could those assets support you for, say, 30 years?
Okay, that's where the rubber meets the road, seeing if the numbers actually work.
Pretty much. But that's not the only income source, right?
Right, there's Social Security and maybe pensions for some people.
Exactly. The DOL guide covers those too. They strongly suggest creating your My Social Security account online to get personalized benefit estimates.
And they mention delaying benefits.
Yes, they highlight that waiting to claim Social Security up to age 70 can significantly increase your monthly payment amount. It's a trade-off to consider.
Okay, so we have potential income sources, savings, Social Security, maybe a pension. What's the other side of the equation?
Expenses.
Yeah.
You have to project your spending in retirement. And this is tricky because of inflation.
Right. Things get more expensive over time.
The DOL provides worksheets to help you think through all the categories: housing, food, healthcare, travel, everything. They often use a 3% inflation factor in their examples, but acknowledge it can vary a lot.
Healthcare seems like a really big one.
Huge. The guide spends a good amount of time on it, explaining Medicare Parts A, B, D, the potential need for supplemental insurance, sometimes called Medigap, and maybe long-term care costs down the road. They even quote a stat suggesting healthcare could eat up something like 17% of a retiree's income by 2030.
Wow, 17%. That really highlights the need to plan specifically for that.
It really does. And they also cover options if you retire before you're eligible for Medicare at 65, like staying on a spouse's plan, using COBRA temporarily, or buying insurance through the health insurance marketplace.
Okay, so project income, project expenses, then compare.
Yep. The DOL guide has a worksheet for exactly that. Compare your estimated annual retirement income with your estimated annual retirement expenses.
And what if there's a gap? Which I imagine is pretty common.
Very common. The guide is clear about that most people will likely find a shortfall. But the point isn't to panic.
Okay, good. So what is the point?
The point is to identify the gap and then look at strategies to close it. And they offer several.
Such as?
Well, the obvious one. Save more. Maximize contributions to your 401k IRAs. Especially get that employer match if you have one that's free money.
Right, and catch-up contributions too.
Yes, if you're 50 or older, you can contribute extra amounts to those accounts. That can make a real difference.
What else besides saving more?
Working longer. Even delaying retirement by a few years can have a big impact. More time to save, investments grow longer, and your retirement period is shorter.
Makes sense mathematically.
They also suggest avoiding big debts as you approach retirement. You don't want a huge mortgage payment eating into your retirement income. And maybe being cautious about large financial gifts or loans to family if it jeopardizes your own security.
That can be a tough one. But practical advice. And revisiting Social Security timing.
Absolutely. They show how delaying benefits can really boost that guaranteed income stream. And they even illustrate how saving relatively small extra amounts consistently, like just $200 more per month, can add up significantly over 10 or 15 years, thanks to compounding, helping to close that gap.
So even small changes can matter. What about in retirement? Any planning tips for them?
Yeah, definitely. Thinking about how you'll withdraw money, from which accounts first. Taxable accounts versus tax-deferred, like traditional IRAs or 401ks. That has tax implications.
Right. And required minimum distributions, RMDs.
Yes, you generally have to start taking money out of those tax-deferred accounts by age 72 or 73, depending on your birth year. Ignoring that leads to penalties.
And you still need to think about investing even after you retire.
You do, mostly to try and keep pace with inflation so your purchasing power doesn't erode over potentially decades of retirement. Diversification remains important.
Okay. The guide also mentions scams.
Yes, a very important warning section. Retirees are often targets. So be wary of unsolicited offers. Don't give out personal info easily. Check credentials of advisors. Be skeptical of anything promising guaranteed high returns with no risk.
Standard advice, but always worth repeating. And understand fees.
Crucial. Know exactly what you're paying for financial advice or investment management. Fees can really eat into your returns over time.
Are there common tax myths the DOL tries to clear up?
A few key ones, like income taxes don't just disappear in retirement. You'll likely still pay them on withdrawals from retirement accounts, possibly pensions, and even potentially on some of your Social Security benefits.
Okay, good to know. What about Social Security taxes specifically?
Depending on your total income in retirement, a portion of your Social Security benefits can be subject to federal income tax. And again, failing to take those RMDs comes with stiff tax penalties.
Got it. What about getting money out of pensions or retirement plans, like lump sum versus annuity?
The guide touches on that choice. A lump sum gives you control but requires you to manage it. An annuity provides regular payments, often for life, but you lose that control and flexibility. Pros and cons to weigh.
And briefly, any other ways mentioned to make money last?
They briefly mention things like reverse mortgages, which let homeowners tap equity, but they're complex, and long-term care insurance, which can help cover those potentially huge costs, but premiums can be high. Worth exploring based on individual circumstances.
Wow, okay, that DOL guide sounds incredibly thorough.
It really is. And the good news is they also point you towards tons of other resources.
Like what?
Online retirement savings calculators, for one. And then they list a whole bunch of organizations, the Social Security Administration website, AARP, investor.gov, mymoney.gov, the IRS site for tax info, sites for finding financial advisors. Lots of places to get more help.
That's great, so you're not just left hanging after reading the guide.
Not at all. There's a lot of support out there if you look for it.
Okay, so wrapping this up, this deep dive, looking at the Algebra of Wealth ideas, the Forbes article, and especially that detailed DOL guide. Hopefully it's brought some clarity.
Yeah, the goal was to connect those dots for you. From building that wealth mindset and habits to understanding investing basics like index funds and compounding.
Right.
And then digging into the practical steps of retirement planning, assessing where you are, projecting needs, figuring out income sources like Social Security, and strategies to bridge any gaps.
Definitely a lot to think about, but breaking it down like this, based on the sources you provided, hopefully makes it feel more, I don't know, manageable.
We hope so. And we definitely recommend you actually use those worksheets in the DOL guide. Personalize it, explore those resources they list.
Absolutely. Because ultimately taking these steps now, even small ones, means you're putting time on your side. You're actively shaping your financial future.
Exactly. You're empowering yourself to build that security. Thanks for diving deep with us on this one.